Hi everyone, and welcome to our session today, where we will share some perspectives from Sweden about integrating sustainability and trade. As was mentioned, my name is Johan Ture. I am market manager at Business Sweden here in Hong Kong, the Swedish Trade Invest Council. And together with me today, as introduced, I have three distinguished guests: Ms. Louise Bergholm, Consul General of Sweden to Hong Kong, Macau; Mr. Erik Halldén, Sustainability Advisor at SEB here in Hong Kong; and Mr. Emmanuel Juppé, the Managing Director of Volvo Bus Hong Kong and also Director APAC North. So to start off, Ms. Consul General, why is integrating sustainability and trade such an important topic for Sweden, and how is it being addressed in practice?
Yeah, well, first of all, good afternoon to everyone. I'm really happy to be here and to discuss this topic, which is really at the heart of the government's policy. Sweden is a trading nation. We're a small economy, and we are very dependent on foreign trade for our economic growth. Actually, 50% of our GDP is made out of exports, and 30% of our exports are made out of imports. I think it's important to remember that trade is really two ways, and we need them both. In the government's strategy for foreign trade, investments, and competition policy, sustainability is underlined. Sustainability is needed, of course, because of the challenge of the climate change that we're facing. And this is a really urgent issue for us to handle in an efficient manner. But the climate change is also pose great opportunities for us to innovate ourselves and to do things that we have done before, but in new ways, and also doing new ways of developing new technologies. And the Swedish government will continue to pursue a free trade agenda. It's only through having open and free markets that we can really reap the full benefits of international trade. And we do expect our trading partners to cooperate with us on this and to adhere to the rules that we have agreed upon. We have, since many years, argued for full liberalization in international trade in environmentally friendly technologies, goods, and services. And we are happy to see that this has come some ways, although there is more to do, of course. And as the Swedish Consul General here in Hong Kong, I'm really proud of the Swedish businesses here that so much underline and showcase the sustainable solutions that our companies have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to build on what you just mentioned, Ms. Consul General, talking more from the broader Swedish industry perspective when it comes to sustainability, it has, as you mentioned, been a very high focus for a long time. And what we do see is that innovation, including sustainability, have become a key factor for increased competitiveness and stability, both short term when it comes to changing customer demands in Sweden and abroad, but also long term when it comes to changing regulations that sometimes incentivize sustainability, but of course also sometimes require it when it comes to new taxes, etc. So looking from a Swedish industry perspective, it is something that has become a key point into the trade aspect for the sort of global competitiveness. And what we also see here in Hong Kong when it comes to the Swedish companies and the Swedish industries, we do see that around 86% of the companies here have integrated sustainability into the business models and strategy, which of course is something that we are very happy about to sort of see. And what we also hear is that more than half of the companies, of the Swedish companies in Hong Kong, also see that sustainability work contribute to the profitability of their business, which again, going back to sort of the global development and importance of sustainability, also is important and interesting that it also can bring a positive sort of development and not only a sort of seen as a cost aspect. And Swedish companies and Sweden has many good examples of where we have done this when it comes to, for example, district heating and cooling, transport solutions, etc., that are moving towards a more sustainable future here in Hong Kong, but also globally. And talking more about also from the Swedish perspective and how sort of it's done is that a key point in this development is is enabling the right context for this when it comes to the environment and the regulations. And what we do have in Sweden is also quite interesting, a sort of the initiative called Fossil Free Sweden that has been spearheaded by Swedish industries, where they have developed 22 different roadmaps for how the Swedish industries can drive the sort of sustainable development, and what requirements that are put then also on the Swedish government to enable this when it comes to changing policies, because it has to be a sort of a tandem, the industries and the government working together to drive this in that sense. So that's a very interesting example, I think, that sort of also, of course, propagates into the internationalization and the global competitiveness, as mentioned. And Sweden is also working with the Swedish industries together in also international contexts. For example, COP last year and also this year, bringing together many Swedish companies to showcase new solutions and also show what's needed to moving forward as a bigger group and as a sort of Sweden activity. But also involved in green transition efforts in many places around the world in sort of helping other markets and countries drive the sustainability agenda with the help of Sweden and the Swedish industries. So the topic is very important, as Ms. Consul General mentioned, from a policy perspective, and we also see that from the industry and the companies themselves. And with that, I also want to hand over to Mr. Juppé. Volvo Buses, you have a long and strong history in Sweden and internationally, and you've also set very ambitious sustainability targets for your operations. Could you share a bit from your side what you see are the benefits of integrating sustainability and trade?
Thank you, Johan, and good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and to share a bit about the Swedish industry is doing in general, and in particular what we do in my company, which is the Volvo Group. Back to your question, when I saw this question, I was actually thinking, why talking about the benefits? Because it sounds like if it was a business decision or a business case, and I don't think it is. Basically, we don't have choice in the matter. For us in my company, I mean, I joined this company 28 years ago now, and from the very first day, environment care was already part of the core values, the DNA. So it's not like something is just happening now. It's been in the culture and the DNA for very long. Talking about benefits, first, again, back. I said you don't necessarily have the choice. Some industries are very regulated, which is the case in our industry. I would say the automotive industry in general. We have a lot of targets, very, very demanding targets when it comes to CO2 reduction, when it comes to limitation of the emission, for example. So there is a regulatory framework that you have to follow. Beyond this, and even for industries, I would say, who are less regulated, having this sustainability totally part of your strategy, of your agenda, will not only open up for new customers, open up for new contracts. That is quite obvious. It has to do to green funding as well. I mean, most of the companies require external funding, and more and more, I'm sure Eric will talk more about this, but investors are really scrutinizing how sustainable the company is before investing their money or the money of their clients. But another aspect as well that we sometimes neglect is to attract the best talents. And this is more and more important. Of course, there is a war for talents in Hong Kong, like everywhere in the world. And the new generation, they are not just joining an employer. They are just not looking at a job. We see more and more they are driven by purpose. And this aspect is more and more important for any person joining a new company. So the benefits are really several.
Thank you. And talking about, as you mentioned, green funding and so on. Ms. Haldén, SEB is a bank with a long and strong history as well that also support other companies when it comes to, for example, green financing. So from your perspective, what do you see are the benefits of integrating sustainability and trade?
Thank you for the question, and happy to be here. As mentioned, I'm Eric, working for the bank SEB, who has a presence here in Asia, but mainly so in Northern Europe. But the question is really also, I mean, looking at what's happening in the world right now, we're going from the economy as we know it today to a low carbon economy, and we are doing it in a very, very fast pace. So to not integrate sustainability into that practices, it just doesn't make sense today. So I really agree with you, what Emmanuel said, that it's not really something that is beneficial. It's more getting more in a hygiene factor today, right? We need to act. We need to do something. And from a bank's perspective, the way we look at it is opportunities and risk. Managing risk, I should say. Of course, opportunities, we need to understand where the future industries will be. We need to understand where the capital will need to move and move with it. There are so many surveys out saying that the transformation to a low carbon economy will cost trillions and trillions of dollars on an annual basis. And of course, if we are not following that in a good way, if we are not understanding what's happening here as a bank, we will miss opportunities. At the same time, if we do not do it and neglect the risks, that is also a big issue if we are not doing this in a good way. We know that the industries that are heavily polluting today may not be part of the economy tomorrow, or they will need to transform in a rapid way. And whoever is laggards here, we really need to monitor that, to understand the risks, to understand the credits risks associated with it. So I think it's equally much of an hygiene factor as it is to seek opportunities.
Thank you for that. A very good answer. And now we talked a bit about sort of why you were doing this and what the benefit is. But Ms. Strupe, how are you doing this more in practice? Do you have any examples of sort of how you are doing this as part of the Volvo Bus operations? But also interesting to understand if you have faced any obstacles in driving this change.
Yeah, and that's the key question, of course. It's how to do it. I think everyone is convinced we have to do it. There is not much discussion about that. So in our case, and that's very much something that is coming, I would say, at a corporate level, we have some targets. I think that's the usual way to do it. The sustainability agenda is split into 3 different areas. One is climate, with the reduction of the CO2 mostly. Another one is resources, where you look at minimizing the use of natural resources, encouraging recycling, limiting the use of hazardous materials as well. And the third one is people, and I think it's worth highlighting this because I think everyone is quite convinced about the first 2. I mean, climate, environment, this has been there for a long time, but people is an important area as well. In our case, we are talking about human rights. We are talking, of course, about health and safety. We are talking about diversity and inclusion. And those aspects, I think, are equally important. And they are probably the ones where we need to put a little bit more of emphasis going forward. So just to name some of those targets, how to do it practically, our company has committed to be a net zero emission company by 2040. And of course, you have a lot of actions related to that. We are part of the science-based target initiative as well. And here we are talking about minus 40% on the vehicular emission by 2030. And to achieve this, when you actually look at how to achieve this, it means to sell 35% of electric vehicles by 2030. So it's not so far away. Coming back to the difficulty, I would say that some of those targets don't depend only on us. And the last one I spoke about, to sell 35% of electric vehicles, that's of course something we encourage. That's something we work very actively with, whether it is for buses, for trucks, for construction machines, but it's part of an ecosystem, right? It's part of the total supply chain with our customers. And here we are back to, we mentioned about life cycle cost or total cost of ownership, and it's really important to try to convince that if sometimes even if the initial investment can be a little bit higher, then you will eventually across the length of the duration of the equipment or the vehicle, you will have a payback for your investment. So the difficulty is probably for those targets that don't depend only on us, and we need to embark and convince a lot of the stakeholders.
I was just thinking of what you were saying here about having an open atmosphere, of course, in your company, and I think this is really important for us to have innovative societies. We need to innovate ourselves in how we do things, both as producers and as consumers. In his policy address just the other day, the Swedish Prime Minister announced a record high investments in research and development, and we're really proud of being number 2 in the Global Innovation Index, and we plan to stay in the top there. And part of why we are so innovative, I believe, is that we let people be themselves. It's you can be who you are, you can be individual, and that we encourage creativity and diversity. That makes for an open atmosphere and a climate where you dare to try out things, and you have to be allowed to make mistakes. Because you will make mistakes when you try out new things, but the status quo is it's not a choice. Yeah, it's not an alternative. Thanks.
Thank you for that addition. Mr. Halldén, how are you from your side looking at the sustainability in trade, and how are you integrating it in practice? And similarly, what obstacles are you facing doing so?
I mean, for us as a bank, of course, if you look at our emissions, they're quite limited, right? If you look at our direct emissions, we have properties, we have electricity bills, etc. It's quite limited. But you need to look at the full spectrum, of course. If you look at what we finance, our balance sheets, that's where the emissions are. Our balance sheet, I mean, we are a Northern European bank, as mentioned, and even though we are not the biggest global bank, we still have a balance sheet that is bigger than the GDP of Hong Kong or the GDP of Singapore. And of course, we can influence with that balance sheet. That's how we are looking at this. So we are doing it from 2 angles, basically. We are looking at whatever is green in that. What can be financed that is, so to say, a low-carbon future. Could be everything from renewables to Volvo trucks that run on electricity, etc. Things that are good for the future. And then we set targets on that. So we want to develop that portfolio. Then we look at the other end of the spectrum, which is equally important, if not even more important. What type of fossil fuels are we financing? And that's where we try to see, okay, how can we reduce this over time? How can we, so to say, lift this, reallocate from whatever we call as the brown to the green? And I think that this is really, really, really crucial. Again, not being the biggest global bank, but we still have a lot of capacity to do these reallocations and to focus on the right things. So that's what we are monitoring internally, not only because we want to make good to the society, of course that's important too, but it's all about staying in business tomorrow as well. And we know that the future brings in what's green, and the yesterday brings out what's not green. And we need to do that in a very structured way, in collaboration with whatever companies we are lending money to. We need to follow their transitions. There could be companies that we are financing that are not yet on the right track, but have a credible plan to get on the right track. And I think that that's also crucial to try to influence. If that doesn't work, then we try to exit. And that's how we manage it internally. And so far, it's one of the reasons why I started working for SEB, I must say. I think it's a credible plan. It's not yet perfect. I don't think that any company is, but we are getting there.
And just a follow-up question there, if you don't mind. Have been the reception from the companies you've dialogues with when it comes to, as you mentioned now, sort of the green transition and the financing when it comes to fossil fuel and so on? Has been a positive response, a positive attitude, or do they see some challenges in this as well?
So what we have done is to build up a massive classification framework internally in terms of managing each and every industry that we see are a bit more heavy polluting than other industries. Of course, these dialogues have been quite tough sometimes. They have been very proactive or informative in terms of getting to know our clients better from another type of perspective. And I think that more than anything, we can show that we actually do care quite a lot about this. I think it's important to have these type of stakeholder engagements and dialogues to be able to show this is what we want to do, this is what we want you to achieve, and we see that you are on the right track or we see that you are not on the right track. Try to get the plan, try to see if the plan is credible. And most of it has been very, very good conversations, some very tough ones, but some very rewarding ones.
Thank you for that. And before we wrap up and open for Q&A, I want to hand over the word to Ms. Consul General. Do you have any sort of final comments you would like to add as part of this session?
Well, there are so many aspects to discuss on this, but one thing I wanted to bring up is, of course, our partnership with Hong Kong when it comes to a sustainable future. We very much support Hong Kong's ambitions to be net zero by 2050. And we're looking forward to cooperating and being in partnership with Hong Kong on its road to a high level of sustainability. When it comes to building materials, to urban transport, or a lot of other things. Hong Kong is a place that I've come to love in just the year that I lived here because of the possibilities to live a sustainable life. I think the greeneries around, the great outdoors here are just fantastic. And I'm also so happy to see that we have the Swedish companies here. They have a lot to offer. And just reiterating what you were saying about the need of kind of shifting perspectives, of not just looking at buying price, but look at the life cycle cost of things that we produce and that we consume. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'd like to open up for questions, if there are any, from any of the audience here. I think there's a microphone in the back somewhere.
Hello. My name is Urban. I'm a colleague of Eric's. Emmanuel, I have a question for you. I'm interested in pricing mechanisms in general. And even though I'm currently not in the market to buy a bus, I'm still interested in the price of buses. And I just checked with ChatGPT that an EV bus costs about 30 to 40% more than a regular one. What do you think it takes to get to a par level? And do you see it as, or does your client see it as, or do you see it as an obstacle to reach your targets on the 35% of EVs sold by 2030, right? How big of a hurdle is this?
Thank you for the question, and sorry to hear you are not ready to buy an electric bus or an electric truck. I will still try to convince you, but I know it's not going to be easy. Interesting with the answer from ChatGPT as well. Maybe it's a sign that maybe there is still a way to go with the technology, because according to my information, it's a bit more than 30 or 40%. But of course, you have small vehicle, big vehicle, and depends how you do the calculation. But I would say today it's probably more around 2 times when you compare with a similar technology with diesel in our case. And of course, it's a challenge. Of course, it's a challenge when you meet customers. You know, everyone is very, very, very interested by this trend, by the technology. But when you start to discuss numbers, then some of them will leave the room. Then you have to discuss, of course, with the ones who have a little bit different approach. I think back to the what we call TCO, total cost of ownership. I mean, with this migration from the fossil driveline to fossil free, there is a clear transfer as well at the same time from what we call OPEX to CAPEX, meaning you will spend less, obviously, you don't need to put the fuel every day. When you recharge with electricity, it's significantly cheaper than when you refill with fuel. So the basic is that you, at minimum, I would say you have to look at the life cycle or the TCO. But sometimes in the current state of the technology, that might work well for some applications. For example, we know that buses are a better use case, for example, than trucks, because they operate on the same route, because they come back every night to the same place, probably more start and stop. Another classical example is refuse collector. You know, the garbage truck. They have so many start and stop, so the fuel economy with diesel is extremely high. So you will find, you will find it easier to justify the move to electric. But for some other application, it's more difficult. I think back to the question, one has to consider some of the externalities as well. And this we see happening more and more in Europe, for example. I think it is yet to happen in Asia overall, but we see many tenders, for example, for urban transport now, where they will put a value to the carbon emission, a monetary value. They will put value as well to the noise, for example, because we know noise is a source of pollution as well. And with electric vehicle, obviously, you reduce the noise a big time. So the way I think to facilitate this discussion and those decisions is at minimum to look at the life cycle cost, but probably to look at some of the a broader picture with the externalities.
I think we can thank you so much for coming and listening to our talk about perspectives of Sweden of integrating sustainability and trade, and hope you found it interesting and exciting. We're happy to talk now after if you're interested as well, of course. Thank you.